The sky vanished behind a swarm of wooden shafts and iron points. We are traveling back to the year 480 BC, to the legendary Battle of Thermopylae, where a tiny force of Greek warriors faced an empire. The story says their enemies fired so many arrows the sun disappeared. But did that truly happen, or is it one of history's greatest exaggerations? By the end of this journey, you will know the astonishing truth behind the legend and the real story of that desperate stand. We will investigate how a single boast about fighting in the shade became an immortal tale. What does it take for a moment of sheer defiance to echo for 2,500 years? This was no ordinary army marching into Greece. It was a force of almost unimaginable scale, a living embodiment of an empire's wrath. Ancient historians, prone to epic exaggeration, claimed King Xerxes commanded over 2 million souls. Modern scholars suggest a more grounded, yet still staggering, figure of several hundred thousand. Picture the logistics alone. This was not just an army. It was a mobile city, consuming the land as it moved, supported by a colossal fleet sailing just off the coast. Its mission was absolute submission. The independent Greek city-states, perpetually squabbling amongst themselves, were gripped by a fear so profound it threatened to shatter them. For the first time, they faced an existential threat they could not ignore. Their response was a desperate, brilliant gamble. They would not meet this titan on an open field where its numbers would spell certain doom. Instead, they chose a place where the very land would fight for them, a narrow coastal pass so tight that only a handful of men could stand shoulder to shoulder. The locals called it Thermopylae, the hot gates, named for its sulfurous springs. On one side lay the steep, impassable slopes of Mount Calidromos, on the other, the treacherous waters of the Malian Gulf. Here, the Persian war machine, its overwhelming numerical advantage, would be rendered useless. This choke point was the perfect trap, a geographical bottleneck where courage and strategy could defy sheer power. The fate of Greece would hinge on holding this slender ribbon of land. Into this narrow pass, the hot gates, marched the core of the Greek defense. At its heart were the 300 Spartans, an elite royal guard handpicked by their king, Leonidas. The legend of these 300 is so powerful, it often eclipses everything else, but the full Greek force was far larger, mustering several thousand strong. Alongside the Spartans stood 700 warriors from Thespia, 400 from Thebes, and hundreds more from other city-states, all united by a common, desperate purpose. This was never just a Spartan stand. It was a pan-Hellenic last-ditch effort. So why does the spotlight burn so brightly on those 300? The answer lies in what they represented. A Spartan warrior was not merely a soldier. He was the product of the agoge, a brutal state-run training system that began at the age of 7. For over a decade, boys were molded through hardship and discipline, learning to endure pain, hunger, and cold, all to forge an unbreakable spirit and a body honed for one thing: fighting in a phalanx. Their equipment was a masterpiece of ancient warfare. They wore bronze helmets, breastplates, and greaves, a full body of metal that glittered under the Grecian sun but weighed down heavily on the wearer. Their primary weapon was the dory, a long, thrusting spear over 8 feet in length, tipped with a lethal iron point. In the tight confines of the pass, these long spears, wielded by men standing shield to shield, created an impenetrable wall of wood and bronze. Why were these specific Spartans chosen? Leonidas did not select his best young fighters. He took only men who had already fathered sons, ensuring their family lines would continue. This was the clearest possible signal. This was a suicide mission from the start. Their goal was not to win the war in a single battle. It was to delay, to inflict such a staggering cost on the Persians that the rest of Greece could rally its forces and its shattered nerve. Their stand was about more than territory. It was about an idea. the radical concept of free men choosing to fight for their own laws and their own way of life, rather than bow to the absolute will of a single king. Every hour they held the pass was a declaration to all of Greece and to the watching Xerxes that freedom was worth any price. The legend of the shaded sun hinges on a single, defiant retort. As the story goes, a Spartan soldier named Dinex was told that the Persian archers were so numerous their arrows would blot out the sun. His legendary reply was simple: "Good, then we will fight in the shade." It is a perfect line, a testament to cool courage in the face of overwhelming odds. But could such a thing have literally happened? Could the sky over Thermopylae have genuinely darkened from a storm of arrows? To answer that, we need to step away from the poetry and into the practicalities of ancient warfare. The Persians were masters of missile combat. Their primary weapon was the composite bow, a sophisticated piece of engineering made from layers of wood, horn, and sinew. This construction gave it immense power and a remarkable effective range. A skilled Persian archer could accurately hit a target nearly 200 yards away, and his arrows could fall from the sky at much greater distances. Their tactic was not precision sniping, it was massed volley fire. Thousands of archers would launch their arrows in a high, arcing trajectory, creating a raining downpour of death upon a fixed enemy position. This is the terrifying image the legend evokes. So how many archers would it take to literally dim the sun over the narrow pass at Thermopylae? Some modern physicists and military historians have actually run the numbers. They calculated the surface area of the pass, the rate of fire of a Persian archer, and the time an arrow spends in the air. The results are staggering. To create a continuous, light-blocking cloud of arrows would require tens of thousands of archers firing in perfectly timed, rotating volleys, while Xerxes' army was colossal, dedicating that many archers to fire incessantly at a front only a few dozen men wide was logistically improbable. The ammunition expenditure alone would have been astronomical. This pushes us toward a more likely conclusion. The phrase was probably not a meteorological report, but a powerful piece of psychological warfare from both sides. For the Persians, it was a threat meant to shatter morale, to make the Greeks feel the sheer, crushing weight of the empire. For Dinex and the Spartans, the response was the ultimate defiance. It transformed a symbol of terror into a statement of unbreakable resolve. They were not just acknowledging the threat, they were reframing it, claiming even the enemy's greatest weapon as a mere inconvenience. The truth behind the arrows may be less about physics and more about the human spirit. The real darkness was not in the sky, but in the shadow of fear that Xerxes hoped to cast over Greece. And in that hot, narrow pass, 300 men and their allies chose to stand in that shadow and fight. For 3 brutal days, the hot gates became a slaughterhouse perfectly designed for the Persian army's destruction. The immense force that had terrified all of Greece was now useless, its numbers a liability in a space only a few yards wide. The battle opened with wave after wave of Median and Kishan infantry surging forward, only to be systematically ground down. The Greek phalanx was a machine of phenomenal efficiency in these conditions. Each man's large, bronze-faced shield, the aspes, protected not only his own left side, but also the right side of the comrade to his left. This created an interlocking wall, a literal bronze and wood fortress. Their long spears, the dory, projected over this shield wall, a bristling hedge of iron points that met the enemy long before Persian swords could even get close. The front was so narrow that only a tiny fraction of Xerxes' army could engage at any one time, while the rest were forced to wait idly, watching their comrades be butchered. The Persians, trained for open field combat and rapid maneuvers, were utterly confounded. They were funneled into a human meat grinder. Frustrated by the staggering losses, King Xerxes committed his personal elite, the 10,000 warriors known as the Immortals, so called because their number was always kept constant. If any army could break the Greek line, it would be these legendary soldiers. They advanced with discipline and confidence, but even they could not overcome the physics of the pass. The terrain neutralized their skill and numbers just as it had the others. The phalanx held, its spears shattering against the elite corps. The Immortals were not just stopped. They were thrown back with heavy casualties, a profound humiliation for the king and a massive boost to Greek morale. You can picture the scene, the mountain on one side, the sea on the other, and in between, a growing mountain of Persian dead. For 2 full days, this grim pattern repeated. The Greeks rotated their front-line troops to prevent exhaustion, while the Spartans, with their supreme discipline, formed the unbreakable anchor of the entire formation. The Persian army was being bled white at the mouth of the pass. Then came the betrayal that shattered the stalemate. A local Greek trader named Ephialtes, motivated by the promise of a rich reward, went to King Xerxes and revealed a hidden secret. There was a path, the Unpacking path, that wound through the mountains and emerged behind the Greek position. This was the fatal flaw in the Greek plan, a risk Leonidas had known about. He had stationed 1,000 Phocian allies to guard this very route, but when the Persian Immortals, guided by Ephialtes under cover of darkness, came upon them, the Phocians were taken by surprise and quickly dispersed. The news reached Leonidas at dawn. The trap was about to be sprung. The pass was no longer a bottleneck. It was a coffin, with the main Persian army in front and the elite Immortals closing from behind. Seeing the hopelessness of their situation, King Leonidas made his fateful decision. He dismissed the bulk of the Greek army to live and fight another day. But he himself would stay. With him remained his 300 Spartans, who were bound by law and honor never to retreat from battle. They were joined by the 700 Thespians, who made the conscious, heroic choice to stand and die with the Spartans, and a small force of 400 Thebans, who may have been held as hostages. This was the end. They moved forward from the main wall into the widest part of the pass, knowing it was their final fight. They fought with a terrible, desperate fury, knowing death was certain, and seeking only to sell their lives as dearly as possible. Ancient sources say Leonidas fell early in this last stand, and a ferocious battle raged over his body as the Spartans and Thespians fought off wave after wave of Persians, 4 times driving them back. They fought until their spears were shattered, then with their short swords, and finally with their hands and teeth. They were ultimately overwhelmed by the sheer press of enemies and the barrage of arrows from every direction. They had held for 3 days, they had killed thousands, and in their final, defiant act, they created a legend that would ignite all of Greece. The last stand at the Hot Gates was a tactical defeat, but its resonance became a strategic victory of unimaginable scale. The 300 Spartans and their 700 Thespian allies were wiped out, but their sacrifice was not in vain. It bought precious time for the Greek fleet to regroup and for the Athenian-led alliance to prepare for the naval battle at Salamis, a clash that would break the back of the Persian invasion. The story of their defiance, amplified by the stirring tale of fighting in the shade, became the rallying cry that united a fractured Greece. Within a year, at the Battle of Plataea, a massive, unified Greek army would finally crush the Persian land forces for good, securing the survival of the world's first democracy and the philosophical and artistic traditions that would shape Western civilization. So, did the sun truly disappear behind a cloud of arrows? The physics suggests it was a powerful metaphor, a piece of psychological theater, but the courage was undeniably real. The legend endures not because of the arrows, but because of the men who stood beneath them. For 2,500 years, Thermopylae has remained the ultimate symbol of valor against impossible odds, a testament to the idea that a free man's choice to sacrifice can alter the course of history. What other ancient legends hide a kernel of truth? waiting for their story to be unraveled. Share your favorite historical mysteries in the comments below, and subscribe for more journeys into the past.